So we are in Zimbabwe. Here is Zimbabwe. Lovely place. Here's a map. Zimbabwe's been through the most. Okay, we're gonna be honest here. Okay, usually I say lovely place, beautiful people, surely beautiful people, but Zimbabwe itself as a country has been through the most. So Zimbabwe, what's news about Zimbabwe? Zimbabwe has created a brand new currency. It's called Zimbabwe Gold. It's a brand new currency launched just yesterday. Yes, and what we know about the currency is that it is gold backed. The currency is gold backed. Unlike many other currencies in the world, it is gold backed. It is backed by the reserve of gold, foreign currency, and other precious metal held by Zimbabwe's central bank. This currency comes to replace the Zimbabwean dollar that has been very, very difficult to manage, very poor, very, very unlucky. Okay, so why are we here? Zimbabwe has gone through the most, fellas. Zimbabwe has gone through some of the most difficult time. Inflation, poverty, inability to get jobs, unemployment, and so many other things. I mean, Zimbabwe produces a lot of nurses, and these nurses have to go to work in Australia or in the UK if they get an opportunity to do so. Because even doctors, very, very sad. And Zimbabweans are leaving the country like nobody's business. They're going elsewhere, looking for a better life. A lot of them are crossing to South Africa, trying to have a better life. Never really a very easy task. Some are even jumping the border. Yes, there's a border between South Africa and Zimbabwe. And between the border, there are rivers that have crocodiles inside. People are crossing even though there are those type of challenges. Sometimes you have to cross, go through a park where there are lions and all. And Zimbabweans have to do that. It's crazy. They come to South Africa looking for a better life, looking to have jobs and stuff. Sometimes they can't even have jobs and all that. Sometimes they get the shittiest jobs you can imagine. Why? In Zimbabwe, things are very difficult. No bread, no milk, no nothing. It's very, very difficult. Very hard to live. And a lot of Zimbabweans that leave South Africa going back to Zimbabwe to visit, they'll take with them bread, sugar, milk, oil, and all that stuff just to go and help the family on the other side. It's very difficult. And Zimbabweans are not the most liked foreigners in South Africa. There's a level of competition now between Zimbabwean nationals and South Africans. We're talking about South Africans who did not necessarily go to university, for the security job, for the cleaner's job, for the tiler's job, simple jobs. It becomes competitive. And sometimes South Africans don't like it because they want a certain salary. And some of the Zimbabweans want to accept any salary because, they're just trying to make a living. And it becomes a clash. How did Zimbabwe get to this point? Zimbabwe got to this point due to sanctions. And in order to understand these sanctions, we have to go back in history. So Zimbabwe was colonized by the British, when they came to Africa, just before they came to Africa. In 1884, Europeans went to Germany in Berlin and sat down to discuss how they're going to divide Africa. And they say, we are going to Africa. We shouldn't be fighting each other in Africa. French people and British and Germans and all that, they all wanted to go to Africa because they knew Africa had so much riches, but they didn't want to go to Africa and start fighting one another for land. So they decided to sit down and split Africa. Just like, okay, it's a piece of pizza. You take this. The pizza doesn't belong to you, my brother, but they still did it. That's how some countries in Africa were ruled by Britain, and these countries speak English, like South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, and many other countries. And France went to Africa to colonize countries too. They took Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Congo-Brazzaville, Gabon, Senegal, Guinea, and many other countries. The Germans took some other countries too. That's how Europeans split Africa. What makes me very sad today is to see these African nations, they all like going to their colonizers. You see Nigerians want to go to Britain. All Nigerians want to see London. You see the same in Uganda. All Ugandans want to go to London. All Kenyans want to go to London. They all want to see their colonizers' place. It's just crazy. Same for the French-speaking Africans. They all want to go to Paris. Cameroonians all want to go to Paris. Senegalese want to see Paris. That's how. Anyway, let's get back to Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe was taken by the British, and the British colonized Zimbabwe for the longest time. As per usual, they beat the living shit out of the local people and took their stuff. I'm telling you, man, they took everything they had. This is your country, and a foreign person who's European comes and takes your land, then makes you his worker. Yeah, that's slavery, purely. When Europeans came to Africa, they took ownerships of the land. In the case of Zimbabwe, British people own all the farms. They all produced food, potato, bananas, tomato, you name it. They produced it to sell to the local people. And whenever they made the money was not banked in Zimbabwe. They sent the money back to Britain. These people were making a lot of money in Zimbabwe just to send the money back to Britain. That's crazy. Then President Mugabe of Zimbabwe was not very happy about that. He said, listen, we are taking land from you. If you do not stop sending money to Britain, then we are taking the land from you. So the white British said to him, but we are Zimbabweans too. We are born here. You cannot take the land from us to give to the local. So he said, if you really are born here and you truly are Zimbabweans and you believe it, why do you bank your money in foreign lands in Britain? You're supposed to be Zimbabwean. Why isn't your money circulating into the economy to grow the economy? I'm giving you time to fix yourself. Well, unfortunately, these people did not do that. And very shortly, President Mugabe applied himself. He took the land back from the Europeans and gave it back to the locals. When he did that, that's when Europe came for him. They sanctioned him.
Having and bearing sanctions banning us from Europe, we are not Europeans. We have not asked for any inch of Europe or any square inch of that territory. So, Blair, keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe.
They said, because you took the land by force from the people, we are sanctioning you. Now, the Europeans wanted to be paid for the land. They said, give us money and we may give you the land. He said, well, there's no way I'm going to give you the money because when you came here, you didn't have any land. You took it by force. Did you pay for it? No, you didn't. I'm taking it just the way your great-grandfather did. So nothing wrong. Well, Europe and America didn't like that. So they sanctioned Zimbabwe. So consequences of sanction is limited access to capital. Sanctions can restrict access to international loans from institutions like World Bank and IMF. And these are institutions that provide money to many countries to help them develop, to build infrastructure and many other things. The other negative of sanction is investor fear. Sanctions can create a perception of risk for foreign investors, discouraging them from investing in your country. So most investors, being foreigners, refuse to invest in Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe could not transact. They couldn't exchange money with any other country. They couldn't buy or export any goods. That's when the economy went down. So that was a job very meticulously done. Very simple. Now, the reason the West gave to justify the sanction was President Mugabe was a dictator. He wasn't a nice person. He was a terrible person, so the country had to be sanctioned. I mean, this is crazy, fellas. You have an issue with the president of a country. You don't sanction him personally, but you sanction the country. Even if you sanction him personally, by you cutting access to oil, sugar, water, and bread, are you sanctioning the president? No, you're not, because the president is a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire. He's got so much money he can import food from South Africa, sardines and pasta and bread. But what about the local, normal, average person? They cannot. So at the end of the day, you are sanctioning the people. You are not sanctioning the president. And yes, some experts believe they do that with the goals of getting the people infuriated. They want the people to be angry, stand up against their leaders. Because these sanctions clearly don't work against presidents. If you sanction the leaders, they don't work. It's the people that you're punishing. So we understand the reason why Zimbabwe was sanctioned as per the West is because they say Mugabe was a nasty person, was not a nice person, was a dictator. But if you look at it in the bottom line, the reason why Zimbabwe was sanctioned is because Mugabe decided to take the land from the Europeans' children and give it back to the African children. Now, unfortunately, when he gave the lands to many of the locals did not learn the trade. They didn't learn how to develop the land. They didn't learn how to fructify their businesses and make money. They didn't learn how to run an agricultural business. And very slowly things went down. There was no more food, no more money for investment. The lands they acquired couldn't serve them for anything. Very sad. And this is very similar to things that happened to Uganda. You know, in Uganda, Idi Amin, I'm sure you heard about him, he's portrayed as a dictator, a very nasty person by the West. In reality, Idi Amin was not happy because of one thing. The Indians lived in Uganda. Where did the Indian come from? The Indian came from Kenya. The Indians were imported in Kenya to come and build the railway in that time. I don't know why the British felt that black people couldn't do a good job. They went and brought Indians from India to come and build the railway coming from Mombasa to Kampala. Mombasa is Kenya, Kampala is Uganda. So from the coast to Uganda, that was the goal of the Indians in Africa at that time. Now, they stayed there after the project. Many of them returned to India. Some of them decided to stay. Some of them stayed in Kenya and others stayed in Uganda. The Indians in Uganda had their own community. They were not mingling and mixing with locals. They were working with their own. They had their own parties, their own marriages. They didn't intermarry any Africans. the cut was very clear. You could see the separation between the two communities. The Indians were hiring some of the Africans to work for them. Now, Idi Amin said to the Indian the very same thing. Why are you living in here in Uganda, but you are banking in Britain? Are you Ugandans or you are British? Nothing changed. So he said to them, from now on, if you want to identify as a Ugandan, but you do not marry a Ugandan person, you have no parties with Ugandans, you do not have business partnership with Ugandans, then I don't see how you are Ugandans. Then I'm giving you a time frame to leave the country. That's how Idi Amin gave them time to leave the country. Many Indians packed their stuff and they left. Many went to Britain. Many went back to India. Some people even believe that the parent of the current prime minister of Britain has something to do with that. So many Indians were chased from Uganda going to Britain and many other places. After Idi Amin gave the businesses to Ugandans, unfortunately, many of them did not know how to run these businesses because they had no experience. They had not done this in the past. Lack of preparation. So the idea was good to try to promote his own people in his own land. However, the people were not ready for the promotion. Let's get back to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a very interesting country because Zimbabwe has got the most literate Africans in the world. Yes, it's true. You can verify that. I know a lot of Zimbabweans are looked very negatively. Zimbabweans are the most literate Africans in the world. President Mugabe was the most qualified president in the world. He had 5 different master's degrees. Great man. But unfortunately, when age caught up with him, his whole policy changed. The big question we ask here, why is Zimbabwe still sanctioned? As per now, 2024, Zimbabwe is still under sanctions. Mugabe is no more. They say they sanctioned Zimbabwe because of Mugabe. Mugabe, long time ago, he passed a long time ago. Now, how come Zimbabwe is still sanctioned? That's a big question. Because they had expectation from the new president. And the new president is not meeting this expectation. He's not giving up. He's not giving away what belongs to Zimbabwe to Western nation. That's why Zimbabwe is still sanctioned. Now, many critics also say that government has done a lot of negative things and they're trying to blame all the negative things on the sanctions. That could be very true. That government has also participated in corruption, in looting and stealing from the asset of the country. That's also something to take into consideration. But should we ignore the fact that the sanction has hit Zimbabwe the hardest? Absolutely not. This new money that they've created is based on gold. Because previously Zimbabwe used even the US dollar just to exchange. Imagine a country using somebody else's currency just to stay afloat. That's how hard it was. The Zimbabwean dollar had no value, so the Zimbabweans started using American dollars. But now they want to free themselves because they feel like nobody's there to save them. That's why they've created a currency backed by gold. Gold cannot create inflation. A currency backed by gold can only be a powerful currency. This is exactly what Muammar Gaddafi wanted for Africa. And that's exactly the reason why they took him out. Thank you very much, fellas. Let me know how you feel about this. Is Zimbabwe moving to the right direction? Do you feel this is a good move? Standing up for themselves? Or should they give in and just accept, be slaves in order to progress and be like a, moving forward country? God bless.